The man who found immortality, Robert Cornish. Immortality is one of humanity's oldest and most fascinating desires. Captivating civilizations and individuals for thousands of years, immortality spans a wide spectrum from mythologies to scientific research. The quest for immortality is seen as a reflection of humans' desire to transcend their limits and discover the meaning of life. However, the realism of this quest and the potential consequences it might bring are subjects of much debate. The search for immortality has manifested in many different forms throughout human history. In mythologies, gods or legendary heroes seek the secret of immortality, while in later periods, alchemists and scientists have investigated immortality by studying physical and biological processes. Yet to date, no person or group has genuinely found immortality. In the scientific world, efforts to find immortality have generally focused on understanding and intervening in the aging process. Research into how factors such as cellular aging, DNA damage, and metabolic disorders affect human lifespan holds the potential for developing treatments that could slow or stop aging. However, scientists have not yet fully unraveled the complexities of the aging process, and no treatment currently exists that can provide true immortality. One of the most famous individuals who claim to have found immortality is the French alchemist Nicolas Flamel, especially associated with the quest for immortality in France and worldwide. According to legends, while working as a bookseller and manuscript dealer in Paris, Flamel was given a mysterious book called the Book of Abramelin. The contents of this book included the secrets of immortality and making gold. Flamel spent many years understanding and applying this book and eventually achieved immortality. During the Renaissance, particularly in Europe, the quest for immortality became more associated with scientific research. One of the famous scientists of the Renaissance, Leonardo da Vinci, tried to understand immortality through his studies of human anatomy. Additionally, clues about the search for long life and immortality can be found in the works of chemist Paracelsus. Among these individuals, the person who came closest to finding immortality in more recent history is Dr. Robert Cornish. Robert Cornish was an American scientist and doctor in the early 20th century. His life and work hold a particularly noteworthy place in medical history. Cornish's most famous and controversial work involved experiments on reviving or reanimating the dead. Cornish was born in Missouri in 1903. A bright child, Cornish graduated from high school at the age of 15 and from the University of California, Berkeley, with honors at 18. By the age of 22, he had completed his medical education at Stanford University and earned his doctorate. After obtaining his doctorate, he continued his research at the California Institute of Technology, working on the fundamental principles of life. However, Cornish's career and name became particularly prominent with the controversial experiments he conducted in the 1930s. Robert Cornish's most controversial experiment was his attempts to restore life. In 1932, he began experimenting with the idea of reanimating the dead. He developed a seesaw mechanism to reestablish blood flow in deceased individuals and thought he would succeed by injecting adrenaline and anticoagulant drugs into the bloodstream. Initially, he tried to bring people who had died from heart attacks, drowning, and electrocution back to life, but was unsuccessful. Don't forget to follow our channel for more content and like the video. Later, he began experimenting on animals to further develop his work. He purchased 5 dogs, naming each Lazarus. In 1934 and 1935, he tried to revive dogs that had been euthanized in a clinical setting by injecting adrenaline and anticoagulants into their bloodstreams and using his seesaw method. The first subject, Lazarus I, was euthanized using ether and nitrogen by Dr. Cornish in an old and gloomy building on the University of California campus. After 6 minutes of cardiac arrest, Lazarus I was placed on a seesaw-like device called the teeter board. An intravenous solution containing adrenaline, liver extract, heparin, and an anticoagulant was administered. Oxygen was then provided while the dog was rocked on the teeter board. Lazarus I's leg twitched first, followed by weak heartbeats, and eventually, the heartbeats returned to normal. The miracle had happened. Lazarus I was brought back to life. To accelerate the recovery process of the dog, which had been in a coma for 8 hours and 13 minutes in pain, Dr. Cornish injected a glucose solution intravenously. However, a blood clot formed, and Lazarus I closed its eyes forever this time. Subsequently, the experiment moved on to the second subject, Lazarus 2. The same procedures were performed, but this time without the glucose solution. However, the second subject also died due to blood clotting. Dr. Cornish remarked, "If the heart of the second dog had stopped for 2 minutes instead of 8, it would have likely recovered. We will repeat the experiment in a few days." The third subject, Lazarus 3, underwent the same procedures and managed to come back to life. However, painful days awaited it. After 12 days in a painful coma, the dog began rolling and even tried to move with its front legs. When it started barking and sitting on its haunches, Dr. Cornish was pleased for the first time following the failed experiments. However, he discovered that a part of the dog's brain was damaged. He hoped that if he could preserve the dog's consciousness, he could begin human experiments. On the 14th day, the dog even caught a fly and was eating well with a good appetite. On the 15th day, Lazarus 3 passed away from a cold after the laboratory door was left open. Subjects Lazarus 4 and 5 also returned to life with brain damage, blind and unresponsive. But Cornish could not achieve complete success in his experiments. When animal experiments proved partially successful, Dr. Cornish wanted to move on to human experiments. He contacted San Quentin death row inmate Thomas McMonigal and offered to revive him after execution. However, California law enforcement rejected Cornish and McMonigal's petition, arguing that the murderer would need to be released under the double jeopardy clause if he were revived. Following this, the university where he conducted his experiments, influenced by public opinion, asked Dr. Cornish to vacate his room. Despite being limited by the technology and scientific knowledge of the time, Cornish's experiments drew significant interest and were seen as ethically unacceptable by some. The ethical dimension of his experiments, particularly the concept of returning from death and the definition of human death, raised fundamental questions. Opinions and judgments about Cornish's experiments have changed over time. Some view him as a brave and innovative scientist, arguing that his research on reanimation after death was an important step for scientific progress. Others believe his experiments were ethically unacceptable and caused animal suffering, criticizing him for this. His experiments are seen as a reflection of the desire to explore the boundaries of science and ethical questions. And today they still form a significant reference point in discussions about medical ethics and post-mortem medical interventions. Today, a research team at Yale University has attempted to revive the brains of 32 pigs. According to a study published in the journal Nature, they restored and rejuvenated brain activities and cellular activities in pigs after death. Although they managed to revive some brain cells, they were unable to restore consciousness. Despite hundreds of years of failed experiments, research continues. In recent years, a U.S. biotechnology company has been trying to find 20 deceased people for a procedure to reverse brain death. However, these efforts have always faced heavy criticism from the scientific community. If we ever succeed in bringing people back to life, we will face great dangers. With food shortages already present in proportion to the increasing population, the world would become unlivable in such a scenario. Human conflicts would grow with the increasing population, and everyone would struggle for survival. What do you think about this? Share your thoughts in the comments.